As we listen to the gospel today, we hear Jesus say that the harvest is abundant, but laborers are few. So ask the master of the harvest to send out laborers. And then he calls the 12, and we heard their names. But, you would think Jesus, when he called his disciples, that he would take the cream of the crop, that he would look for the best. And the people he called were very unique, different, maybe a little motley. But, they were fishermen, tax collector. He even called the one that was going to betray him. And, we would think he would pick the qualified to do this. But instead, he qualifies the ones that are called. And we're all called. I can remember when I was at my interviews to enter into the seminary. So, my mother thought I was a shoo-in, that because I had a great uncle a priest and I had a cousin a priest, so they're going to take you. There's no doubt that you won't make. But I was nervous. So I get there, and I had no idea what this interview process was going to be like. And, they asked me questions, and of course, one of the questions they asked me, they says, have you ever been outside of the U.S.? Have you ever visited another country? And I said, no. And mind you, this seminary that I was being interviewed for was on the St. Lawrence River, and from where we were sitting, you could see Canada, and you could swim across the river. And so the priest looked at me and said, have you never been to Canada? We live this close and you've never gone to Canada? I said, oh yeah, I've been to Canada many times. He says, that's another country. And I'm like, okay, there's And then it came to, some psychological exam. And, I had to do these tests. And this one test, he gave me these cards, and they were pictures on each card. And I had to tell a story about each picture. And that was making me a little nervous. And so he goes, just relax. I said, well, how can I relax? I says, this is when you're going to find out that I'm really crazy. And the priest said to me, he says, sometimes it's the crazy ones that we can work with. And I'm like, oh, this is encouraging. A week later, I got my acceptance letter. Who would ever know how this would end up? Because let me tell you, not one of my teachers, I don't think, would have ever said, oh yeah, he's going to be a priest. I don't think they ever said that. And I think they're probably amazed that I had 8 years of school and I ended up with 2 master's degrees, But here it was this kid that was a little nuts applying to be, a seminarian to be considered for priesthood. So God, in other words, can work wonders with what he has to work with. And that goes for all of us. God calls each and every one of us. And I'm sure sometimes we don't feel qualified. And yet, he does wonders with each of us in whatever vocation we have. And we might not even realize that he's at work within us and touching other people's lives. Even me as a priest. You know, I have people that come up to me every once in a while and they say, you know, Father, I met you for the first time 10 years ago or whatever it was. He says, and I'll never forget what you said to me. And they quote me. And it doesn't even sound familiar at all. I mean, you know, it's like I want to say, I said that? But, you know, but that tells me that that's the Lord. That's the Spirit working. And the Spirit works through us. Just, you know, maybe in a greeting that you give to someone, you know, someone you might smile to that's having a bad day, that you have no clue what they're going through, and you just are that warm presence. Whenever we show compassion, God is at work within us. You know, we hear in the very beginning of this gospel today that Jesus saw the crowds and his heart was moved with pity. He felt something for these people, and it just wasn't a superficial feeling. It was something deep within that he felt the need to help these people. He had compassion for them. And how many times do we show that compassion to people around us? Maybe to people we don't even know. And sometimes it's kind of hard to do that right at home. You know, my mother always used to remind me, charity begins at home. But you know what? It was easier to be charitable to the lady down the street and help her out, because if I shoveled her driveway, she was going to give me $5. You know, if I shoveled my driveway at home, I wouldn't even get a thank you. So charity was much easier down the street. But when you do it at home, it speaks volumes. It speaks volumes. So as we come to the table of the Lord today, let us ask God to open our hearts to respond to his call, whatever it may be. And that call can change daily. And we need to be able to respond generously. He is the Lord of the harvest. Let him gather us together for his honor and glory. God bless you.